What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fryar Place, where the conversations are fire. I'm Irving Fryar. I'm the host here at the Fryar Place. We have a great show, great guest lined up for you today. I did not advertise it to let you all know, but I wanted to surprise you. Y'all come on in the room. I see we have, wow, you've got 5 or 6 people who have logged in already. Who are you? Throw your names in the comments. Let me know that you're here. We're live at the Fryar Place on YouTube every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. I'm actually live right now, not just on YouTube, but we're live on my personal Facebook page as well, because I think that this guest needs to have more viewers. This is a special man, special person in my life. Hey, Rashida, what's going on? How are you? Good to see you today. Anybody else? I see the numbers are going up. Who else is on? Throw your name in the chat so I know you're here, whether you're on Facebook or whether you're watching on YouTube. Either way, let me know you're with us today. What's going on? What's going on, Mom? How are you? She said, good afternoon, son. Wanda, what's happening? How are you? Good to see you this afternoon, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Listen, I don't want to delay because I don't want to take advantage of his time. He's a very important person, very important man. One of the greatest, I've been very, very blessed in my life, not just to play football at a professional level, but I've been blessed not just to have good players with me, but I've been blessed to have great men who were coaches leading me, guiding me, helping me along the way. And one of the first ones, my first one was actually Bill Gordon in high school. Great man. God bless his soul. He's gone on to be with the Lord. But I have my college coach, who is one of the greatest college coaches, arguably, I'll argue about it, the greatest college coach to ever coach college football in the history of college football, y'all. Do you know who that is? I'm going to bring him in. Here he is, Tom Osborne. Hey, Coach, what's going on?
Well, I'm doing fine. You've given me quite a build-up. I hope I don't disappoint people.
Come on now. Look, your accolades speak for themselves. We're going to talk about the person because, I love the relationship that we have. You were a head coach at the University of Nebraska for 25 years. And I don't think that I'm special because I know you do this with probably any of the athletes that you coached, any of the players that came through and played under you. When I call you, you answer the phone. That's just absolutely remarkable to me. As many lives as you've touched over 25 years, as many young men as you've mentored and even been a father figure to, and you still have the time to reach out and to care and to touch us as grown men. So thank you. The accolades are well deserved.
I appreciate it, Irving. And probably one of the nice things about coaching is the relationships and the fact that those go on for many years. And so I don't consider this a bother. I'm always glad to interact with you, and it's great to be on with you today. Get a chance to catch up a little bit with how things are going.
Well, listen, I've got some stats. Whether you want me to read them or not, I think the people need to know these stats. I'm not going to read them all. I'm not going to say them all. But in your 25-year coaching career, 255 wins, only 49 losses, and 3 ties. That is absolutely remarkable. 13 conference titles, 3 national championships. You've coached 53 All-American athletes, one of which I am. Thank you, Coach. And 1 Heisman Trophy winner, Mike Rozier, one of my best friends, Mike Rozier, I was with last night, told me to tell you hi. It's remarkable. 2 national championships in a row. Was it 93, 94? That team, the 93 team, I think is considered the best college team of all time. What you've done over time in football, in college football, is just absolutely remarkable. And I'm blessed to know you. But I want to have a conversation with you about a few things that I wondered about. There's when I was being recruited in 1980, Coach. In 1980, I was being recruited as an All-American defensive back. But when I got to Nebraska, you switched me over to offense. What was the thinking there? I mean, thank you. Thank you, because I don't know if I would have made it into the NFL as a defensive back. I probably would have hurt myself trying to, hit somebody and got myself in the bad position and did something wrong. But what made you switch me over to offense?
Well, I remember looking at your high school films, and as I recall, you were playing tight end, and you really didn't get the ball. I don't remember seeing you catch very many passes. And Frank Solich was the running back coach, and he was recruiting you, and he just told me that everybody said you were a great athlete. And when we got you back here, we just were amazed at your speed and your athleticism, and uh, and so I guess we needed more help at receiver, and certainly didn't disappoint. You were a great player for us.
I always wondered about that because, if had I gone somewhere else, had I chosen another school, I probably would have stayed as a defensive back, played in defense as a defensive back in college. So thank you. I appreciate that, Coach. Things happen for a reason. And speaking of wide receiver, we never did have this conversation before because you never did talk about it before. But that's what you were. You were a great high school wide receiver, a great Hastings college wide receiver, and you were drafted into the. I didn't know that about you, Coach, that you were drafted into the NFL. Washington Redskins at the time. What are they? Commodores now? What do they call them? Comrades. Commanders and the Commanders, yeah. And you were drafted into the NFL as a wide receiver. Come on now. You never told me about that.
Let me go back a little bit because actually in high school and college I played quarterback. And,
Okay.
Was drafted by the 49ers. And this will probably bring a smile to your face because today there are seven picks. Each team has 7 picks. In those days, there were only 12 teams, and so each team had 30 picks. So I guess I was what you might call a high draft pick.
Uh-huh.
I was drafted in the 19th round.
Okay.
So I went out there to the training camp, and at that time they didn't have 53 players. They had 38.
Wow.
And so the head coach called me in first day, and he said, "Well, I understand you're a quarterback." I said, "Yeah, I'm a quarterback." He said, "Well, we have 2 quarterbacks here. We have Wyatt Tittle and we have John Brody." And of course, Tittle had been all pro for many years, and Brody was a first round draft pick, and he'd been there 4 or 5 years. And he said, "We're only going to keep 2. And if you think you can beat one of them out, well, you go right ahead and play quarterback." So I got the message that he was telling me that if I stayed quarterback,
don't try it.
I had no future. And so I said, "Well, I think I could be a receiver." And one thing led to another, and I made it down to the final cut. And then they put me on the practice squad. And I think they had 5 guys on the practice squad. So we had 38 veterans. And when I was in the camp, there were, as I recall, they had 38 veterans, they had 30 draft picks, and they had 30 free agents. So there were 100 people in camp.
Wow.
There really were no open spots as far as any of the veterans leaving. So so the odds were tough. And then the Redskins picked me up and played a couple years. And in those days, they didn't take very good care of you physically. I had a pulled hamstring. And so they started shooting with Novocaine every week, and I'd play.
Wow.
And I could hardly walk the next day, and finally I developed so much scar tissue, I just knew that I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't run. So I quit, came back here, went to graduate school. So that was the end of my pro career, which wasn't very long, but it was interesting. I learned a lot. So anyway.
Wow, that's awesome. So it was drafted by the 49ers and then went to the Redskins. Okay.
Right.
Wow, it's just football is so different now. And I think that was one of the coining thoughts that you had, or coining one of the things that you focused on at Nebraska was not necessarily, and I'm not downing the athletes to come there, but you were able to take maybe not the top blue chip athletes, but those who were good athletes, those who were being recruited nationally, and bring them to the University of Nebraska and get the best out of them. You're able to do that with the program that you had there, the weightlifting program, the nutrition program. You were one of the forerunners when it came to that at the University of Nebraska. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as the off season and strength program. That's correct. I was an assistant to Bob Devaney for 11 years, and we started out pretty good. The first 4 or 5 years he was there, we won the conference championship, and people were amazed because Nebraska had only maybe 2 winning seasons in the
Wow.
previous 20 years.
Wow.
And then in 1967, 1968, we went 6-4 both years. Didn't go to a bowl game. And in 68, we lost Oklahoma 47-0 down there. And so people were getting a little bit antsy and thought Bob should maybe fire some assistants. And Bob said, well, if one guy goes, we all go. And I was glad to hear that because I was about 33 years old at that time with a wife and 3 kids. And but there was a guy that was lockering next to me down in the old Coliseum.
The mushroom garden.
Yeah, that's right.
The mushroom garden. I remember that. Yeah.
This guy was a pole vaulter, and he'd gotten into weightlifting. And he kept telling me, he said, I think I can make your football team better. And so I took him in to see Bob after that 68 season. And probably if I'd been a year or 2 earlier, Bob wouldn't have listened, but everything was on the table because we realized we needed to make some changes. And I said, here, Boyd Epley here says he thinks he can help our football team through weightlifting. Well, Bob was kind of old school. And of course, in those days, they felt that weightlifting made you muscle bound.
Right, right.
Wouldn't be able to comb your hair, you know. And so Bob got it over and he said, well, okay. We said, if we don't get better, you're fired. Boy. So that was quite an auspicious start for Boyd. Boyd was actually the first full-time strength coach
at the University of Nebraska. Yeah, setting the stage.
Football, yeah. And so he had, I think, something like 60 assistants that went out as head strength coaches. Some to the NFL, some to the major colleges, and
wow.
So he was kind of the guru for many years. And of course, everybody eventually got into weightlifting, and it's not uncommon today, but it did give us somewhat of an advantage for a period of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm of that era, or was in that era of believing, because when I was in high school, we really didn't lift weights, the athletes, because again of that stigma that you were going to get muscle bound and that you couldn't, move the way you needed to move because you'd be too tight and too stiff. But wow, I did. And see, that's great. Cause that's an eye-opening, information for me, revelation for me, because I didn't know I was a part of a new move, because I was in there with Boyd Epley and the weight room and the winter conditioning or off-season conditioning down there in that mushroom garden, running and lifting, and it was phenomenal. And I actually went from 185 pounds my freshman year to my sophomore year being about 200 and 202 pounds, coming in running about a 4.6 40, 4.5 40 to running a 4.2 40, 4.23 seconds. So, and that was because of weights and stretching. I know it had to do with lifting weights and the stretching that we did. So that's phenomenal. But it wasn't just that, Coach, with you. When you came in and you were still with Devaney as an assistant coach and you started out working for free, you implemented the I back formation for offense. And that was kind of innovative back then, wasn't it? Where did that come from? Is that something that you thought of or that you had seen before, but you incorporated that in the Nebraska offense and it became, it took off like wildfire?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, those 2 years in 67, 68, they were pretty much transformational because fans weren't happy. And so Bob, in the 68 season, he decided that he would change the offense. And he asked me if I would help design the offense and take over as what was in de facto offensive coordinator. He didn't have the title, but I was able to call the plays. And so we went to the I formation, and there were some schools running the I at that time. But we had been in a full house, unbalanced line, which Bob had coached at Michigan State at one time as an assistant. And that with him to Wyoming and had success with it. In his first 5, 6 years at Nebraska, he had success with it. But people had kind of caught up with it. And if you had a really great running back, it was hard to feature him in a full house backfield. So we were able to start implementing the I formation, and we fortunately had some really good players there that came on. And so the rest, I guess, is history.
I know when I was there, Mike sure liked the I formation because he got the ball all the time. and even though you were feeding him the ball all the time, we come into halftime and he say, "I'm not getting the ball enough. You got to give me the ball more." But what do you want?
Your Turner Bill one time told me, he says it's the University of Rozier.
He told you that one time.
He's like, the publicity. But,
he's a special cat.
Yeah, we really had a good eye back in Roger Craig.
Yeah.
And when Mike came, we had Roger and we had Mike. They're both great running backs, and we felt that probably Roger would be the guy that would be more likely to be willing to go to fullback and block. And so Roger did. And
I don't think he was happy about it, but he did.
Yeah, he wasn't thrilled. But so Mike took over to I-back, but they both carried the ball quite a bit. And of course, that really worked well for Roger because the 49ers saw that he was not only a good runner, but he was a good blocker.
Yes.
And so for many years, Roger Craig was the premier back for the 49ers. They won some championships out there. And they had Tom Rathman playing fullback. So
that's
two
right.
of our backs were kind of the headliners for the 49ers.
That's right. And Roger was the first one. I think he was the first back in the history of the NFL to run 4,000 and catch 4,000 yards in the same season. Roger did that. Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah.
They were good times. We got a lot of people watching, Coach. I see Sister Dennis. Is that Dennis? Yeah. Richard Melton, Kiki, I see you. Brian Ingram, one of my teammates from the New England Patriots, is watching. One of my high school teammates, Tyrone Johnson, is watching. He should have been recruited by you. He was a better football player than I was. I don't know what Coach Solish missed, but he missed that one. My mom is watching, Coach. Say hi to my mom.
Well, hi, how are you? I remember being in your living room many years ago, and always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, and you know what, Coach? That was one of the things that really impressed us because the other coaches that came by, they didn't really come and spend the time that you spent. What was the key for you to come all the way from Nebraska, recruit a young knucklehead like myself, and get me to come to the University of Nebraska? What was the key for you back then? Because prior to that, I guess you hadn't done much recruiting in Nebraska. Maybe when Danny Glover was playing back then, but there was a period of time where it was silent as far as your recruiting in Nebraska. But then after me and Mike Rozier came, Guy Rozier and Billy Rozier came, and then there were Stanley Wade and Paul Miles. There were quite a few guys from this New Jersey state, the state of New Jersey, that came out to Nebraska. What was the key for you recruiting?
Well, first of all, Monty Kiffin, who coached many years in the NFL, Monty started recruiting in New Jersey and got to know some of the coaches. And then Frank Solich took over New Jersey and the East Coast. And I remember going back there, and Frank had never been in New Jersey before.
He told me that story. Yeah, he got lost.
We drive up down the freeway and we could see the school we wanted to go to, but we couldn't get on the freeway. And so that was, I think he just about quit the first day he was back there. But he was really a great recruiter and identified talent. And like in your case, I looked at the film. You're playing tight end, as I remember. You really didn't get the ball much at all. And but Frank had done his homework, and he said, this guy is really a great athlete. And so we went ahead and recruited you. And of course, I remember one time we recruited a guy from New Jersey. It wasn't you. And I asked him, I said, do you know where Nebraska is? He said, yeah. He said, it's the other side of California. Okay, but I think emotionally to him it was further away than California.
Right,
He never
right,
could.
right.
So it was a quite an undertaking, but we did begin to get quite a few players, and then when you get a few players from New Jersey,
Right.
kind of helps you recruit others. So anyway, that
Well,
helped.
to tell you the truth, Coach, I didn't really know exactly where Nebraska was either. And my recruiting trip, I mean, you guys, it had to be special, had to be some kind of emotional connection because even my recruiting trip, when I came, it snowed the whole time. So I never really got out of the hotel room to really be able to see, the facilities or walk around the campus because it was a horrible blizzard while I was there. So you guys, I must have really connected with Coach Solich and yourself. I was also reading something about you. You were in the National Guard for a while, the Army National Guard. How did that happen? What?
Well, as I said, I was in the NFL,
Uh-huh.
and at that time they had a draft, and so either you're going to be drafted for 2 years,
Okay.
or you can go into the National Guard and do 6 months in the off season. And then you had to go to meetings and summer camp for
Hmm.
another 5 years. And so that's what I did because I felt that if I was going to play in the NFL, I better be there. I couldn't take a year off and
Right.
then come back later. So
Right. Right.
so that's why, so I was in the National Guard. Then eventually, of course, they did away with the draft. Now it's all volunteer,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
but there was a draft at that time.
Well, they tout the or promote the military as a career now, not necessarily. They leave out the part where there's a possibility you may have to go to war. you,
They leave out basic training and all the stuff that you go through.
yeah. That's why you go through that because you may have to go to war. Listen, if anybody who's watching right now, if you have a question for Coach, just throw it in the comments. I see some of you who are watching from my Facebook page. I see some of you are watching from the YouTube channel. If you have a question, just put a Q in front of it. That way I know it's a question and I can throw it up and Coach can answer. We'll read it and Coach will answer. Gary Wright, good to see you. Mom says, good to see you, Dr. Osborne, sending much love because you loved us. Wow. Now, she wasn't saying that, Coach, when I left on August 13th, 1980, when I left New Jersey to come to Nebraska. She was crying like I was going to war.
No. It would be hard, Irving, to turn a child loose to go someplace that you've never been.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably 1,500 miles away, and as a parent, I can understand what your parents went through.
Mm-hmm.
But we tried to make sure that people knew that their son would be treated well, and so hopefully in most cases that was what came across. And but we always I always felt that the main thing we want to do is to make sure that parents felt good, that we would get it, and they would get an education, and that they would be treated fairly, and they would be treated well. And so I think in most cases it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. I didn't. You know what, Coach? And I need to say this to you, and this is because of how you carried yourself and the way you treated the athletes. You were true to your word, but you were just a great example on and off the field. And because you had that DR period in front of your name, Dr. Tom Osborne, I always thought to myself, that's what I want. And I know, one of the things you emphasized when you came and you visited, when you were sitting in our living room and drinking my sister's Kool-Aid, one of the things you emphasized was education. But I know when I finished at the University of Nebraska and got drafted into the NFL, I had not graduated. I didn't go back to the university, but I did go back to school and get my doctoral degree. And one of the reasons I did that, one obviously was for myself, but the other was for you, because you cared about me and because it was important to you. And I knew that doing that, you would be proud of me. So I just wanted to say that, let you know you're one of the reasons I went back and got my PhD, and I got it in theology, philosophy and theology. I actually have 2 doctoral degrees, THD and a PhD, one in theology and the other one in philosophy and theology. So I just wanted to let you know that you're a part of that. And I appreciate you.
Got 2 degrees, and I've only got 1. So you passed me up.
Well, I don't know if I passed you. I wouldn't say that.
But congratulations. There aren't very many former NFL players that have gotten a doctorate. And so you're certainly to be congratulated for sticking with it and doing what you did.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. After I finished my dissertation and I finally graduated, I probably didn't pick up a book or read anything for about 6 months. It was, that was tough. Yeah, that was tough. I wrote a 350-page dissertation. It was whew, one of the toughest things I've ever done in my life. But anyway, so politics, you ended up being a congressman. What? I never pictured you when I heard that, saw that, read that, and I never pictured you as a politician. What pushed you into politics? And you served 3 terms.
Well, I never thought that I'd be in politics either. But what happened, Irving, was that Frank Solich had a couple chances to go other places as a head coach or as a coordinator, and I told Frank, I said, I'd like to go another 5 years, and so 5 years came, and I was still relatively young. I was 61 years old, and so Frank took over, and I didn't want to go coach somewhere else, and so I kind of looked around. I still felt I had some energy, could make a contribution in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about the 3rd District of Nebraska, which is mostly rural. It's about 80% of the land mass of Nebraska. It's where I was from originally.
Mm-hmm.
And they're losing population. So many young people were leaving. And I thought maybe I could help a little bit. So anyway, I ran for Congress, and I would say it was a very different world, and something that I probably would like to change a few things if I could. But I learned a lot, and so I did spend 6 years there in Washington, and I did a lot of traveling. I went to the Middle East 5 or 6 times, and
Wow.
with our troops. But mostly I had a lot of windshield time because it was 63 counties, and so I was driving every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be back on the weekends, and then I'd be back in Washington during the week. So it took a lot of time.
Wow. Did you get the people to come back? Did you accomplish that goal? You said people were leaving that 3rd district, and it carried most or the largest land mass out of the counties or the districts in the state of Nebraska. Did you get people to come back? Oops, look at my camera. My camera went out. So.
I think, Irving, to some degree, I did. We started entrepreneurial classes in high school because so many kids felt like if there wasn't room on the farm, farms are getting bigger. That was the biggest problem. And if you had 4 or 5 kids in the family, it would not support, one farm wouldn't support 4 or 5 children. And so we began to teach entrepreneurial education. If you had an idea how to develop a business plan, how to access capital, how to turn it into reality, and start some businesses in the 3rd District in small towns that weren't necessarily farming. They might be related to it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we did see some progress in that area. And we began to at least hold our own. We weren't losing population quite as quickly.
Coach, one of my cameras went out, so I just see you and I don't see me.
Okay.
Hold
Well,
on, I'm trying to fix it. This is modern technology. See if I can get it started back up again. If not, I'm gonna have to turn the show over to you and let you talk. I don't see it coming back on.
We can hear you fine. So
okay, yeah, but I want to get it so we can. Let me see. Nope, it's still going. My camera's going. Oh well. I can see you, Coach. You keep talking. Listen, what changes? There have been a lot of changes in the game. What are some of the changes you like? What are some of the changes that you don't quite like or agree with necessarily?
Right. Well, I think the main topic of conversation right now, Irving, is the NIL, name, image, and likeness, where players are being compensated
Right.
for their name, image, and likeness.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's inappropriate. And certainly many people for years felt that players should get paid something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a sense, there's some good things about it. But and some people compare it to professional, and they say, well, now college athletics is like professional athletics. But it's not entirely, because in the name, image, and likeness business, if some school goes out and raises $25 million that they give to their recruiting class, that's an average of 1 million per person, and maybe somebody's going to get 5 million,
Right.
somebody's going to get 500,000. They're probably going to have a pretty good recruiting class. And if, on the other hand, some schools only able to raise 2 million, they're probably going to have a hard time having a good recruiting class. So I'm afraid that we're going to have an extreme movement to the haves and the have-nots. There'll be 5, 6, 7 schools that may really dominate in recruiting. And so it's not like professional athletics, in that in professional athletics, you have a salary cap. So every team can only pay their total
Right.
payroll so much. But there's no salary cap in college athletics. And so you're going to have some people at one end of the scale that are way, way up there, and then some that are down. And so I'm concerned about that. And in some way, something has to be done to establish parameters.
Mm-hmm.
So at least you don't have that imbalance. And the other thing, of course, is the transfer portal, because right now, any player can leave at almost any time and transfer to another school and be immediately eligible. And so theoretically, it could be that you could lose your whole team. You could have 50, 60 guys take off on you, and you have nothing left. But in professional athletics, you do have free agency, but maybe only 3 or 4 players on a roster are free agents. So because of contracts, you've got at least 90% of your team coming back next year.
Right.
And you know how long they're going to be there. So again, I think something has to be done where you can have some degree of continuity on your team, or else it's going to be chaotic. And of course, we're now evolving into maybe 2 or 3 really big conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think eventually, I'm not sure it'll happen, but it could be that they'll break away from the NCAA and establish their own ground rules, because the NCAA has kind of kicked the can down the road and has not really stepped in and been very forceful. And so I think the ball is going to be primarily in the hands of the conferences, and particularly the big conferences.
Right.
So anyway, there's a lot out there right now that's a little hard to understand, and maybe not in the best interest of the game. I think it'd be good that the players do receive some compensation, but there have to be some kind of guidelines. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm going to do it this way, Coach, because I think all of my cameras are out. That's amazing how my cameras are out and we can see you. Okay, it's going to be your show. I'm just going to give you the show. How about that, Coach? I think it's amazing. We have Gary Wright said, and he asked the question, does Dr. Osborne think the NIL will hurt college football? I mean, you got your explanation right there, Gary. But they should have had that when I was playing ball. Getting compensated as a college athlete. That would have been nice.
Right. Well, he did have a scholarship for an education, and that's worth quite a bit. And sometimes, the justification, Irving, is that coaches can leave.
Right.
So why in the world shouldn't players be able to leave? And coaches get compensated And because if you're a coach at most schools, you do have a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually a clause in that contract that says if you leave before your contract's up, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it may be, you're going to owe the school $5 million, $10 million. So there's a buyout clause in there, and so it isn't entirely that coaches have no restrictions on them. But I think that there is a point well taken that coaches get paid and coaches do move. And I'm not saying that should not be the case with players, but I don't think we can have the total flux that we're seeing right now, because you can have teams be almost an entirely different team 1 year to the next.
Right.
If they happen to get some really good transfers and if they all come through, you're going to be pretty good. And if on the other hand you've lost some of your key players, it's going to be really difficult to survive.
Right. Well, I mean, it is the times. It's what's going on, and social media seems to be driving all of that. You know, with the world being shrunken and people having access to somewhat of everything, it's really making a big difference in what's going on now. I mean, when I was playing ball, I mean, this is a long time ago. You said you retired at 60, 61. You went into politics. I'm 60 years old now, almost, Coach. Unbelievable. But there was one telephone with a cord in the wall, and we seem to do all right with that. Now you got, I mean, you can watch games from your phone, which is unbelievable the way things have. How have you kept up with the times and all of those changes in all of those years?
Well, probably not really well, but I can text and I can send emails, and I'm not on social media. It seems to me that sometimes can get you in more trouble than it helps. And of course, the problem with some of the social media is you can say almost anything you want unrestricted without any evidence of being something that's true or not. So it has become a little bit of a wild, wild west out there, and I think it's difficult for a coach and to deal with his players because they read that stuff and they hear that stuff.
Right.
If you've had a bad game and you've fumbled the ball at a key time and the whole state's mad at you, and you're 18 years old or 19 years old, or even if you're 30 years old, like in the NFL, it's kind of hard to keep your head up. And so you're living in a goldfish bowl, and at that age, it's particularly difficult.
That's wisdom right there, because like you just said, I do believe social media has that kind of impact on players, whether they're younger players in college or whether they're older. I mean, I've seen it where guys just kind of tank. They don't lose their talent, but all of a sudden, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, because people are saying they're this or they're that, or they're not this, they're not that, and you can't continue to get bombarded with all that negativity and still maintain. It's hard to maintain a positive attitude and go out and play free without having to press or without trying to do more or trying to make up for what mistakes people are saying you're making. So, yeah, I think it does have a big and sometimes a negative impact, more so than a positive impact on athletes, particularly if somebody's struggling. It's tough. Coach, what did you, I mean, I think you mentioned it earlier, but first of all, when did you know you were going to be a coach? Was that something that you wanted to do? I mean, you were playing ball, you were an athlete, you were an All-American, you got drafted into the NFL. Was coaching something that you aspired to do? Was that something that you could sense you were going to get into?
No, not really, Irving. It was kind of surprising because I came back to the University of Nebraska with the intent of going into college administration work, and went ahead and got my master's and my PhD in educational psychology. But I knew that I would miss athletics because it had been such a big part of my life. So Bob Devaney came exactly the first month that I came back to Nebraska. Bob Devaney was hired to be the head coach of Nebraska. So I went over to see him and I said, Bob, I would like to be a graduate assistant coach. And and at least stay involved with athletics somewhat. He said, "Well, I've got all the coaches I need. I really don't need you to coach." He said, "I do have some players over in the Selleck Quadrangle. They're raising Cain, and they've thrown the dorm counselor out, and they're running the show."
Really?
Yeah, and he said, "Now if you'll move in with them and kind of ride herd on them and settle things down, you can have some meals on the training table." So I said, "Well, okay, big deal." So I moved in with these guys, and I broke up a few fights and one thing and another, and things did settle down. And apparently he appreciated that. So when spring ball came around, he said, "Okay, yeah, I think maybe we could use you out there on the field." And so I started as a graduate assistant, but I didn't have any plan to be a coach. I got married at that time.
Mm-hmm.
My wife thought she was marrying a professor. And then one thing led to another. And I did finish my degrees, and I've been teaching and coaching. And finally, I just realized that I couldn't just give up athletics. And so I told Bob that, and he said, "Well," I said, "I can make $10,000 as a professor. And if you can pay me $10,000, I'd like to be a full-time coach." He said, "Okay."
Wow.
And one thing led to another. And so I stayed with it for, I guess I was coaching 36 years. But I'm glad I did it because the relationships were the important thing. It wasn't the rings and the watches and the trophies. It was more the relationships. And so I still have, people like you and a couple thousand other guys
Wow.
that I've enjoyed spending time with.
Oh, Coach, you are God sent. That was, if people ask me all the time, and I apologize if my camera's not working, we're just doing the voice, but this is the way we have to do it now. Modern technology, it just kind of does what it wants to do sometimes. But you're a God sent. And people ask me all the time, how did you wind up in Nebraska? If you had to do it all over again, would you do it the same way? I would do it the same way. I wouldn't choose anything different. And not because of the school, but because of the coaches and the men that I had an opportunity to serve under and to be a part of. Coach Huey, great coach, great man. We've stayed in contact. Haven't talked to him in the last few years. Coach Solich, great relationships. Yourself, great relationships. And your voices in my life speak louder now than when I was actually with you. When I was with you as a young man, 18, 19, 20 years old, I wasn't paying attention to you. I was going too fast, didn't have enough sense. They say God takes care of babies and fools, and God was taking care of me. But now, as I look back, your voice speaks louder in my life as a grown man than it did when I was a teenager. So I want to thank you for recruiting me, for seeing whatever it was you saw in me at the time that I didn't see in myself. And just thank you because you stuck with me through the years, through my ups, through my downs, through my ins, my outs. You always maintain contact with me. You always reach out every now and then to make sure I'm okay. And that's always one of the first things you ask. How you doing, Irving? And when you ask, you're not doing it out of habit. You're doing it out of sincerity. It comes from your heart. And I can tell when you say it because I know you a little bit. So thank you, Coach. I just appreciate you, man. I do. I really do.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And it is kind of strange, Irving. You're not the only one. I've talked to so many players
Mm-hmm.
who said, when I was at Nebraska and you'd said this and that or whatever, I had other things on my mind.
Right.
But now looking back 10 years, 15, 20 years later, I can understand a little better what you're trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always good to hear, But as I said, the relationships have been the really great thing. And certainly I remember some of the games and some of the high points, some of the low points. It seems like you always remember the losses more than you do the wins.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about that. They asked me about some highlights in my career, and I'm like, I don't really remember a lot of the highlights. I remember when I dropped the ball. I remember when I fumbled the ball. I remember when we lost games. I don't really focus on the good stuff.
Yeah. I think Bear Bryant said that one time. He said you always remember the losses. But it is true also that when you're winning and things are going pretty easily, you're not going to change much. But when you encounter adversity,
Yes.
like that 6-4 season I talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
where we lost to Oklahoma 47-0, everything was on the table, and we made some changes at that time that were pretty significant. And there was also a juncture back in 1992 where we did about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up 9-3, had a pretty good team, but we didn't feel like we were where we should be, and we made some changes that led to a pretty good run toward the end.
So that's the word right there. Listen, everybody who's listening right now, if you're not where you think you ought to be, or things are not going the way you think they should be, it's time to make a change. You heard it from the mastermind right there. He's the master of making change. My coach, Dr. Tom Osborne. Yeah, he's got the experience, and it came from his lips to our ears. Coach, thank you for being with me today. I really appreciate it. This is hot. This is a great conversation. I got a chance to talk to you about some things that I never got a chance to ask you about, particularly about me being switched over to offense. But you're one of the greatest men I've ever known. There's like 3 men that I know. My bishop, yourself, and Raymond Barry was one of the other ones who was a great man. I got a chance to play under him. And also Don Shula. Don Shula was a great man, not just my coach, but he was a great man. And I'm very fortunate to have been able to have all of you in my life. So I appreciate you, Coach. Thanks for being with us today. Does anybody have a question for him? I don't see any questions. Do you still spend time with teammates and keep up with some of the students? That's what Wanda wants to know, Coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still mentor 2 young guys right now, and we're mentoring about 10,000 kids in a 5-state area, most of those in Nebraska, but we're also in Iowa and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Kansas. And so I guess one of the things that I noticed over time was a lot of changes in the family structure, and a lot of things like drugs, some of the social media that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It really is harder for kids, I think, today to weave their way through adolescence into successful adulthood. So having somebody who cares about you unconditionally and will spend time with you and reflect with you makes a huge difference. And our graduation last year, our graduation percentage out of high school was 98%.
Wow.
And most of these kids are single parent families and living below the poverty line. So we feel that it does make a difference. So that's what we do.
That's awesome, Coach. That's awesome. Gary Wright says, I just want to let Dr. Osborne know that one of my favorite college games to watch was when Nebraska beat up on Oklahoma in the Friday after Thanksgiving, whenever that was. I don't know what year that was, but when I was in Nebraska, we always beat Oklahoma. So I don't, we always took care of Oklahoma.
Yeah, we had a few years where we didn't too.
Well, yeah, I don't remember those, Coach. I wasn't there then. but we always took care of them. Coach Switzer and those cats, we handled them pretty good in our days, in my days there.
As you did.
Yeah. But things have changed. It was the Big 8 then. It's like 12, 15, 20 now, whatever it is.
Things have changed.
Yeah, things have changed. Coach, thank you. I'm not going to hold you any longer.
Okay.
I'll be in touch with you. Like I said, Mike and Guy said hello. I was with them last night at the bowling alley, and I really do appreciate it. Please tell Mrs. Osborne, Nancy, that I said hello and love you, and God bless you, Coach. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Irving. Thanks for having me on.
All righty. All right. We'll see you soon, okay? I might be getting out there. I told you I might be getting out there to Nebraska. If I am, I'll give you a shout so we can connect, okay?
That'd be great.
All right, Coach. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
All right. You guys don't see anything on my screen because my cameras went out. I'm going to try to finagle them. Let me see if I can finagle them and get them to work before we sign off. Right now, this is a true podcast because you hear my voice and you don't see my face. I don't know what's happening with my cameras, but none of them are working. And my feed to Coach Osborne was working. So let's see okay, I'm not seeing any of my cameras. They're not showing up anywhere. What happened They're all on. They're all on. Let's see what's going on here. Let's see if I can fix this. They're not even showing up. Not even showing up on my computer. So something went wacko. All right. But anyway, y'all, I want to thank you for watching today. Right now, you're just listening. I guess that's how it's going to have to be until I think I need to turn it off and turn it back on. They'll pop up then, but I can't do that without signing off from you all. So thank you all for being with me today. Antone Williams, God bless you. Great show, Irving. Thanks. Questions you ever thought about going into, questions. Question, have you ever thought about going into coaching for Nebraska? No, I have not. Coaching takes too much time. No, I don't have time for that. No, I mean, it's a large, humongous commitment time-wise, and I'm 60 years old now, almost 60, and no, that time passed. I should maybe have done that earlier in my career or earlier in my life. I thought about coaching, but no, I'm too far down the road now. I got to be concerned about my retirement. Tyrone said, great show. I'm going to catch you more often. We're live every Friday, Tyrone. This is the first time in a year. We're a year old, and this is the first time in a year that this has ever happened where the cameras stop working. I don't know what is going on with the cameras. It's just a glitch. Sometimes this stuff happens. I'm not going to stay on here long because anybody who's going to watch this podcast will not stay on and listen to it afterwards. But thank all of you. Nebraska teams were the 84 team. As always, much love, my brother. Much love to you, Tyrone, too. Wanda, thank you for being with us. Richard, Ricky, thank you. Gary Wright, thank you for supporting us today here at the Fryar Place. Chucky, Uncle Chucky, I see you're on Facebook. Make sure you go over to the YouTube page, search the Fryar Place and subscribe. All right. Larry Boy, what's up? Antone Williams, good. Gary Wright, yes. I see you, Tyrone. AQ, what's happening, brother? Thank you. Mom, thank you for being with me today. I'm working on this. Rex, hey, great seeing you. Thanks for being with us. Hope, I thank you for being here. I should have mentioned you to Coach. Brian Ingram, I don't know if you're still there, bro, but holla back. Yeah, good to see you. Kiki, is that Emoti P. Dennis or Denise? Is that right? Hopefully I'm saying your name right. I love the after football bond players, coaches share. Yes, football literally is more than a game. Yes, it's a family. Emoti, you're right. You're exactly right. And that's why we've still maintained our communication, our relationship, Coach and I. Rashida, God bless you. I'm out, y'all. I'm going to throw this music on. I'm going to stop talking. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, same purpose. Conversation that's fire. Hopefully we'll have a picture on and my cameras will be working next week. If not, we'll just do it this way. But we'll do the best we can. Love y'all. God bless you. Thank you for your support. We had a great show today. Thank Coach Tom Osborne, Dr. Tom Osborne again for spending time here at the Fryar Place.